the relations just ended there. And thereafter, both the British and the Americans have not looked upon us. They think that we are too much inclined to the East. But we have no apologies at all. We feel we are better in relations with the people who also respect us, not that persons who look down upon us. So we are very happy to be here. And we are anxious to actually have our relations more comprehensive and consolidated between ourselves. Yes, we are a very advanced country, but there's a lot that we can learn from you. There's a lot that we can benefit from that relationship. And there's a lot that we can open for the Russian Federation to participate in our economy, especially in the mining sector and in agriculture. There's a lot that we can afford for you to participate. And in that process, the West will run away. You see, the West have just begun consolidating their power in Zambia, our next neighbor. You know, there was a time when Zambia and Zimbabwe won. It was called Northern and Southern Rhodesia. It was won by the British, but they were now separate. And the Americans are consolidating their power in that country, both in terms of security and in terms of financial support to Zambia, to make sure that we feel lonely. But that will not change us, because we have taken a course which, as a people, that we feel we want to be independent, and we choose our friends ourselves. And besides, we are independent today because most of us in the leadership trained here during our war of liberation. We got our independence because we were supported by yourselves here, and we don't forget that history, and you've stood by us. So, Mr. President, I am happy to be here, and if opportunity avails later on, I mean, we may find time to chat and go into more detail as which areas we must focus in terms of supporting each other, and in terms of where we feel we need external support, more especially in the area of defense and security, as well as food security. In those areas we need to be supported, the mechanization of agriculture and so on. You can't go to the West. We have to come here, because the West would want to see us down. They support our neighbors, Zambia and Malawi, very heavily. But in spite of that, Zimbabwe's economic growth is the fastest growing economy in the region, in spite of us being isolated by the Americans.
For the first time in history, Russia declared United States of America their enemy. And that was announced by a Russian envoy, Russian ambassador, who was speaking somewhere in Burkina Faso. And that statement was made when that envoy was in Africa. So remember, Russia has been trying to make inroads even in Africa, but the tension has been palpable. So many political elites on geopolitics have been trying to break down what exactly is understanding on Russia by declaring the US as their enemy. This happened after, and after that, this was actually occasioned by a decision of the move by Ukraine to invade Russia using US weapons. So this is what's happening, and this is how all that played. So of course, the Russia-Ukraine war broke out. Ukraine has been getting weaponry from the US. But according to, I think, the NATO deal or so, they're supposed to use the US weapons to protect themselves in their land. But in part of the evolving strategy to protect themselves, they decided to invade Russia, and the US approved that decision for them to attack Russia in Russian land using the US weaponry. And it is and the geopolitics experts are saying that is what might have irritated Russia, that US allowed Ukraine to invade them using the US weaponry. So I want us to break the developments around this, and to the tail end of this I will explain why this should be a worrying news to Kenya, looking at the other developments that have followed. So consequently, what then followed later, as you can see, that development shocked different countries in the world on what exactly will be, because those are two big superpowers. Russia is a superpower and the US is also a big superpower. Then in retaliation, Russia sent a fleet of its warship and submarines in the coast of Havana in Cuba. And these warships and submarines actually carrying missiles and some nuclear. Actually, it's carrying their weaponry. This is something that Russia do not welcome. It is not really a welcome news, not Russia. US do not welcome, because what exactly do Russia then mean by taking that? Remember, even before they attacked Ukraine, there was a similar strategy of jogging up and they said we were not going to. There was such a similar move of their military setting up, you know, around Ukraine, and they declined to. They first told the world they were not going to invade Ukraine, attack Ukraine. But 4 days later, attack was launched, and that is why that move is really causing some jitters across the world corridors. Now, the world will be wary of this because Russia has been doing the same, and that is not the first time. And by the way, that is the first time that Russia is sending their weapons, that weapon outside the Black Sea, or rather their missiles outside the Black Sea. Now remember, this aspect of sending warships and submarines is similar to something happening in Taiwan. Russia is a very close ally of China, and now remember, China Navy even overtook the US Navy as the largest naval force in the world. And China are also surrounding Taiwan. They have not said they want to attack Taiwan or anything, but they are also surrounding the Taiwan island. President Jinping of China actually announced that before the end of his tenure, he will ensure that he brings back Taiwan to the Chinese mainland. Taiwan is a very strong ally of the United States of America, and in fact, they do joint military drills. So it's also a place that it's also a very good ally of the US, and if US were to need support, or rather military support, Taiwan is part of their strong allies. So the same move is happening, and I'm explaining this because there is something I want to head to, the other development that has happened just around this case. Taiwan and the US recently, the former Speaker of Congress, or let me say that, the former Speaker of Congress, Nancy Pelosi, traveled to Taiwan, and that really caused tension in China because China had allegedly banned Taiwan, had warned Taiwan against hosting US citizens there. And remember, there have been that soft hostility, not soft, but just a hardcore soft hostility between China and America. So when former Congress Speaker Nancy Pelosi traveled to Taiwan, it caused some tension. But I've just told you of the strong ties between the two countries. US had vowed to protect Taiwan borders and democracy. And in any case, you need to remember, in any case, if China is to try to attack Taiwan, then the country of support that will support Taiwan is actually the US. So just that's going on, the new development by just emerged. Russia has intensified de-dollarization campaign. And according to a report that was just released, Chinese yuan became the most traded foreign currency on Russia's Moscow stock exchange after halting the US dollar and euro transactions. So Russia has intensified its position on de-dollarization and dropping the dollar so that they pick a gold-backed currency. But I just want to say something about that. Do you know, even as Russia is pushing for a gold-backed currency, US has the largest gold reserves in the world. So that is why you see, America, the US is not normally so much disturbed by that de-dollarization thing, because they have the largest, and that is why you can see hostility in the West African countries. The West African countries have a hostility. They're chasing the American bases there because they're saying most of the oil, most of the gold reserves is actually conserved in the US. So even the people that are pushing for gold-backed currencies, at the end of the day, that the holder of that gold is actually the US. So that was just a sidebar. Now Saudi Arabia has also, which also have the largest oil reserves in the world, is also taking that direction. They're moving towards de-dollarization. And so Africa is finding itself in crossroads. Why? The BRICS bloc, which is now behind the de-dollarization campaign, is gaining entry in Africa. And so far, apart from South Africa, we've seen South Africa. Initially, BRICS had the Brazil, Russia, India, China, and Saudi Arabia, and South Africa rather. So Africa here, Zimbabwe, Egypt, Ethiopia, and Burkina Faso are warming up for BRICS. So if they warm up for BRICS, then what that means here is things are not going to be very usual. And recently, Mnangagwa, after visiting Kenya here, flew to Russia, was in Russia, and his speech there really left many people in Africa speechless.
Would accelerate progress and development. We recognize that a multipolar world is the panacea to both opportunities and challenges that confront humanity today. The old geopolitical global order, dominated by a select few, resulting in the perpetual marginalization of most of us in the global south, is no longer acceptable. A situation, in our case, in Zimbabwe, we call for the removal of illegal sanctions, which you have mentioned, that have held back our economic development and growth for the past 24 years. Zimbabwe is open for business and welcomes investments, partnerships, and collaboration in all sectors of the economy. Mindful that strength lies in our unity. Zimbabwe considers the Russian Federation as a consistent global ally. To harness the opportunities presented by a multipolar world, it is necessary to shift the paradigms in our approaches to cooperation. Resilience, peace prevailing in the country. Zimbabwe's economic GDP. I also appreciate Your Excellency availing through Ultrachem and Dmitry Mazepin a vessel for the transportation of fertilizers to Zimbabwe. We are grateful that we received it correctly at the time we needed it in terms of our tropical season. for agriculture. This, however, my dear brother, is a demonstration of your commitment to support small and developing countries like Zimbabwe.
Mnangagwa is the Zimbabwe president, and Zimbabwe is heading to elections, by the way. So that speech by Mnangagwa, and Zimbabwe produced lithium. If they head Russia, they're going to head towards Russia, then Africa is going to be at crossroads, because with a gold-backed currency, there will be disruptions in the world trade. The global trading currency now is the US dollar. So if the BRICS is going to get its way, I understand even Nigeria is also warming up. And I'm a bit confused about that aspect of Nigeria, because just recently, Timudu, is it Timudu of Timubu? Timubu rather. Timubu is really pro-British and even changed the national anthem, the Nigerian national anthem, to the colonial era British anthem, and so it's drawing some serious conversations in Nigeria, or whether they will be able to join BRICS. But you can see the rebellion. The Sahel nations, rather. Look at the Sahel nations, the Burkina Faso, the Mali, the Guinea. Niger has remained with Macron of France. Look at Senegal, or rather the Sahel region that is even expanding to Sudan is warming up for Russia. So quite a chunk of it might come, and quite a chunk of it might go with Russia. But then you will realize that recently there was some celebration, I think a festival or celebration in Russia. And Russia is running an ideology that Jesus was a black man. You know? And what that ideology is supposed to achieve is, and saying that the blacks should be viewed as the superior to the Europeans. That this message is resonating well with Pan-Africanists, and that is why you see the Ibrahim Traore and most of the Sahel nations are taking that direction. Do you know, even recently, I just want to point out here, you know, South Africa is a member of BRICS, huh? And let me just explain here. It's very interesting to help you also understand the geopolitics of this Russian issue. There was an election in South Africa, and there is that Democratic Alliance that is geared towards the whites, and then there is the party EFF, the party of who is this? Malema, and then the ANC. Now the ANC is falling. Now Malema, being is that much as he is normally a pro-Pan-Africanist, but do you know he is pro-Russia and a very strong defender of Russia. Now in that negotiation for a coalition party, because ANC did not get enough numbers to propel them to to get Ramaphosa to second term, one of the points of convergence is by Malema is because South Africa is going to support Russia. So you can see the way they get their way, and they have really manipulated a bit of it. Now back to that, Jesus is a black thing. Jesus is a black ideology. They want to ensure that Africa, you know, the white Christianity is part of the tool that was used to manipulate and maybe colonize Africa. So they want to find each and every ideology that will detach Africa from the West. And one of the things they've picked is that Jesus is a black. By the way, you can get some time and listen to this, get to read more about that. Now, the push for de-dollarization is the big thing for the continent, because its effect is something that will have some ramifications in economy. And this is why I want to break it down to the Kenyan context. Kenya trades with Russia, and we bring fertilizer. Remember, even the fertilizer we gave last year as a first subsidy, fertilizer, cereals, and some wheat we import from Russia. And if we import from Russia and we are not going to use dollar, then what does that mean? If we import, and of course if they, it means at some point we may need to think about BRICS. Okay, that's even better. Look at China. Look at China. China is our strongest infrastructure partner. In fact, recently they were promising, they wanted to build us. I don't know whether it has been declined or is accepted. The China were promising to build the Kenya a new foreign affairs office, and the Washington team really raised some red flags on that, because that would mean that we'll have to manipulate our foreign policy standing. So with BRICS coming in it and the dollarization, it has some effect even on that. We import from Russia. So which is the currency we're going to use? And what will be the effect if we get more imports at a better deal from Russia? Then that means we would actually weaken the dollar in Kenya. If the dollar is weakened in Kenya, remember most of those concessional loans that we are paying, and loans we are paying them in dollars. So paying interest on the principal when the Kenyan shilling is weak against the dollar, who is going to suffer? It is us. And other exports, when the Kenyan shilling is weak, remember we export other things from other countries too, plus machinery, Belarus, where Germany, Taiwan, South Korea, we export, we import other things. So, and when our Kenyan shilling is weak, and this applies to other countries in the continent, the value of us even servicing our loans is going to choke the nation. And that's why Kenya is standing at a very difficult space, even on this. Concessional loans we are getting, they will be very expensive. Now, if the cost of other imports also are expensive, then it means we are also having issues of inflation. Then lastly, the largest oil supplier is Saudi Arabia. We currently have a deal with Saudi Arabia of G2G. What will be the fate of that deal with this development? So ladies and gentlemen, that is my take on this. I do like global politics because it plays well for geopolitics of the continent, live in our country, Kenya. And that is the new kit that we introduced in the blog. And thank you for amazing support. By the way, when we started this during President Ruto's tour in the US, we were so skeptical about how it will be received, but I'm glad the reception has been overwhelming. Thank you.